Henry, a homeless man, was about to eat his last crumbly sandwich when he spotted a shivering, starving puppy. Without hesitation, he broke his sandwich in half, sharing it generously. Watching from his luxurious bakery, William Prescott, a wealthy and stern man, was about to angrily chase them off, but stopped cold, stunned by Henry's kindness. What William did next would shock the entire town and change their lives forever. Could a simple act of compassion transform a man's heart? Let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Willow Creek awoke slowly beneath the gentle whisper of dawn, a sleepy Vermont town known best for its maple-lined streets and picturesque storefronts. It was early autumn, and a soft mist hovered lazily, wrapping itself around the rooftops and drifting quietly through the deserted cobblestone streets. The air was brisk, carrying with it the faint, sweet aroma of fresh bread and pastries drifting from Prescott's bakery, the grandest establishment in the center of town. As morning brightened, early risers hurried along, jackets pulled close, eyes fixed on their destinations, ignoring the familiar figure tucked away at the corner of Maple Street. Henry Cooper sat hunched beneath a frayed, woolen blanket, his broad shoulders stooped with weariness from years on the streets. At 42, Henry was not elderly, yet his harsh lifestyle had etched deep lines into his weathered face, softening once vibrant blue eyes into a quiet, resigned gray. His scruffy beard, streaked generously with gray strands, framed a face shaped by hardship. Beneath the grime and neglect, traces of former handsomeness remained, a sad echo of a life once stable and respected. His clothes, worn layers of donated flannels and coats too large for his lean frame, offered inadequate defense against Vermont's autumn chill. Though the community around him moved busily, Henry lived almost invisibly, enduring disdainful glances or worse, forced apathy from neighbors who preferred to pretend he wasn't there. His days passed monotonously, driven by a simple yet elusive goal. Henry wanted nothing more than steady work, dignity regained, and a place he could finally call home. Each night, he dreamt vividly of warmth, laughter, and security, only to awaken to cold reality each morning. But despite his circumstances, bitterness never took root in Henry's heart. Quiet, thoughtful, and gentle, Henry treated everyone, even those who scorned him, with an unfailing kindness, a reflection perhaps of lessons learned long before poverty took hold. This particular morning felt heavier than usual. His stomach twisted from hunger, grumbling softly beneath the heavy layers of cloth. From his pocket, Henry retrieved his breakfast, a hardened half-loaf of bread, salvaged from a diner's trash bin the evening before. It wasn't much, but today it was everything he had. He held the bread carefully, as though it might crumble away, but before he could take a single bite, a quiet whimper drew his attention downward. At Henry's feet sat a puppy, small and trembling. Rusty, as Henry would soon name him, was scarcely more than a few months old, a skinny golden mix with fur matted and damp from the mist. Rusty's brown eyes, large and expressive, gazed upward pleadingly, filled with desperate hunger and a fragile hope. Each visible rib beneath his dirty coat told a grim story of abandonment and struggle. Rusty didn't bark or jump about as puppies normally might. Instead, he sat still, looking silently at the small morsel in Henry's hand, patiently resigned to rejection. Something tugged painfully at Henry's chest. Carefully, he broke the stale loaf into 2 uneven pieces. Rusty tilted his head curiously, eyes widening slightly, cautious but undeniably hopeful. Henry placed the larger portion gently on the pavement, nodding encouragingly. "Here you go, little guy," he murmured softly. Rusty hesitated only briefly before approaching, sniffing gingerly, then devouring the offering hungrily. Unseen by either, a shadow moved in the doorway of Prescott's bakery. William Prescott, owner and patriarch of the town's wealthiest family, had stepped outside to arrange the cafe tables. William was a commanding figure, tall, lean, and impeccably groomed, his silvery hair combed back with precise elegance, his tailored dark suit always spotless. He exuded authority, confidence, and a pride that came from decades of success. His bakery was not merely a local establishment. It was a status symbol, a thriving business catering to Willow Creek's elite. William carried himself with an air of superiority that many admired but few truly liked. His sharp gaze locked immediately onto Henry and Rusty. Irritation flickered across William's carefully maintained features. He detested disorder, particularly when it tarnished the refined atmosphere surrounding his bakery. As he stepped briskly forward, William prepared to harshly instruct the unwanted pair to move along. But as he opened his mouth to shout, the words died in his throat, replaced suddenly by silence and a strange, unaccustomed feeling, a mix of surprise and reluctant admiration. He watched, momentarily transfixed, as Henry gently stroked the puppy's head, whispering comforting words as though Rusty were a cherished friend. William Prescott, whose heart had hardened through years of cold business transactions and social expectations, found himself profoundly unsettled by the quiet act of compassion before him. The homeless man, a figure he had so often dismissed with contempt, had displayed a generosity that William, despite his wealth, rarely found within himself. Rusty, finishing the small feast, wagged his tail feebly, stepping closer to Henry with cautious trust. The simple exchange, honest and pure, touched something long buried within William, and a flicker of shame made his cheeks flush briefly. He was unsure how to respond, standing awkwardly, watching the pair from a distance. It was a momentary pause, but it carried significance. Henry, unaware of his influential observer, gently lifted Rusty into his arms, carefully wrapping the frail puppy in the edge of his blanket. Rusty, sensing safety, nestled closer. Henry felt an unusual warmth spreading through his chest, an unexpected companionship blossoming amid his loneliness. William turned abruptly, striding back inside the bakery without a word. The image of Henry and Rusty lingered stubbornly in his mind, disturbing him more than he cared to admit. He busied himself, barking orders at employees, attempting to reassert control over his emotions. Yet, as he arranged the pastries and breads, William's mind repeatedly drifted to the scene he'd witnessed. He glanced toward the street again and again, conflicted and disturbed, his pride battling with an unaccustomed sense of guilt. Outside, Henry adjusted the blanket around Rusty, his hands trembling slightly, not only from cold but from a sudden hope that perhaps today was different. He felt a quiet purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Rusty leaned his small head into Henry's chest, offering comfort in return. With a heavy yet hopeful sigh, Henry rose to his feet, holding the small puppy securely, resolved to take one more step towards the goal he'd held tightly for so long, a better life. Above them, Willow Creek awoke fully, unaware of the subtle change unfolding below, indifferent yet to the fact that a single compassionate act had set into motion events that would ripple profoundly through many lives. Henry, for the first time in years, felt no bitterness toward those who ignored him. Instead, he felt hopeful, inspired by the quiet heartbeat of the small life nestled against him. Meanwhile, inside the bakery, William Prescott struggled silently against unfamiliar remorse, unaware that soon his entire understanding of humanity and of himself would be irrevocably transformed. William Prescott stood silently behind the bakery counter, his sharp eyes fixed firmly on the cash register as he counted the morning's profits. Despite the comforting familiarity of numbers and meticulous orderliness, he couldn't shake the uneasy image of Henry Cooper and the small dog. The softness he'd glimpsed in Henry's gesture bothered him deeply, poking through the hardened layers of his carefully constructed persona. William wasn't accustomed to such moral discomfort. At 62, with a tall, dignified posture, silver-gray hair impeccably combed, and icy blue eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, he exuded authority. He had built Prescott's Bakery into Willow Creek's prized establishment with rigorous discipline, demanding perfection from himself and his employees alike. Yet today, amidst the rows of fresh pastries and loaves, something unfamiliar gnawed at his heart. It was a stubborn feeling that he had somehow missed something important about life itself. The bell above the bakery door chimed cheerfully, interrupting his thoughts. He raised his head sharply, expecting another regular customer. Instead, Emily Prescott stepped through the doorway, shaking autumn leaves from her wool coat and smiling warmly as she approached. Emily was 25, with her father's elegant height and refined features, but softened by her mother's gentle green eyes and wavy chestnut hair. She carried herself with natural confidence, tempered by sincere compassion that seemed unusual for someone of her privileged background. Fresh from university graduation, she brimmed with optimism and an unwavering desire to change the world, or at least Willow Creek's corner of it. She embraced her father briefly, feeling the stiffness in his posture even now, before stepping back to look at him closely. "Hello, Dad," she said gently, noticing immediately the distracted set of his jaw. "What's on your mind? You're usually not lost in thought like this." William cleared his throat sharply, masking his discomfort with a practiced neutrality. "Nothing important," he dismissed briskly, returning his gaze to the receipts. Emily, accustomed to his evasion, studied him closely, undeterred. "It doesn't look like nothing," she persisted, eyes narrowing slightly in playful suspicion. William sighed quietly, placing the pen down and meeting his daughter's gaze directly. "There was a situation this morning outside the bakery. A homeless man and a stray dog loitering around. Not good for business." Emily tilted her head slightly, eyebrows raised in gentle challenge. "And that bothered you so deeply?" "It's Willow Creek, Dad. We've always had people who struggle. Pretending they don't exist doesn't solve the problem." William scowled, irritated by the gentle accusation. "It's not that simple, Emily. Image matters here. We can't afford to become a place for every drifter in town." Emily took a step closer, her tone softening, a touch more serious now. "They're not just drifters, Dad. They're people, and they're part of our community, whether you like it or not. Ignoring them isn't a solution. Have you even tried talking to any of them?" William's lips pressed thinly together, visibly discomforted by her pointed question. Emily had always been this way, empathetic, stubborn, and unyielding in her belief in humanity's potential. He admired that quality, even envied it at times, but he'd never admit that openly. "You don't understand how difficult it is to run a business," he countered stiffly. Emily's voice softened further, filled with genuine affection and quiet challenge. "Maybe not, but I do understand that kindness matters, and it's never too late to try." Without waiting for her father's response, Emily turned gracefully and walked out onto Maple Street, determined to find this homeless man who had managed to unsettle her father so thoroughly. Meanwhile, Henry had settled himself into a quiet nook near the local park. Rusty lay curled at his feet, dozing fitfully beneath a borrowed coat. Henry gently stroked the puppy's fur, his mind wandering back to memories of better days, before he'd lost everything in a series of unfortunate events: his job, family, dignity, all taken by circumstances that had spiraled far beyond his control. He knew well the sting of being invisible, or worse, openly scorned. Lost in thought, he barely noticed Emily approaching until she stood directly in front of him, her gentle voice breaking through his reverie. "Excuse me," she said softly, her eyes filled with genuine warmth. "My name's Emily Prescott. Do you mind if I sit down for a moment?" Henry looked up sharply, instantly cautious. People rarely approach him with kindness, let alone introductions. Emily's sincere expression quickly eased his defenses. "Of course," he replied hesitantly, watching as she settled onto the bench beside him. "I'm Henry," he added quietly, "and this little guy here is Rusty." Emily smiled warmly at the sleeping puppy. "He's adorable," she said kindly, then turned her attention back to Henry. "I heard you had an encounter this morning with my father, William Prescott." Henry stiffened slightly, expecting judgment, but Emily's voice remained gentle, understanding. "I'm sorry if he treated you harshly. He can be difficult, but he's not a bad person." Henry shrugged lightly, eyes dropping to Rusty's sleeping form. "I know people like him don't like seeing people like me around. I understand." Emily shook her head firmly. That doesn't make it right. Actually, seeing people struggle shouldn't make him uncomfortable. It should make him want to help. She paused thoughtfully, then continued softly. I'd like to help, Henry. You and Rusty both deserve kindness. Henry stared, visibly moved yet cautious, unsure of how to respond to her unexpected generosity. Emily, sensing his uncertainty, smiled reassuringly. No strings attached, I promise. My degree is in sociology. I spent 4 years studying how communities can help those in need. Maybe we can start here, with you and Rusty. Henry's voice trembled slightly, betraying the vulnerability he usually concealed so carefully. You don't even know me. Why would you bother? Emily's expression softened further, eyes gentle yet resolute. Because I believe everyone deserves compassion, Henry. And because it's time my father learned that lesson too. Across the street, William stood hidden behind the bakery's window, silently observing the interaction between his daughter and the homeless man who'd stirred his conscience. Conflicting emotions churned inside him. Pride at Emily's kindness, resentment at her criticism, and an undeniable unease at the realization that he had indeed failed to recognize the humanity in those he dismissed. Henry, oblivious to his silent observer, finally nodded hesitantly, feeling a cautious sense of hope awaken inside him. Rusty stirred slightly, as if sensing his mood, and Henry gently lifted him into his lap. Emily smiled again, this time with genuine warmth. Good, she said decisively. Let's start small. Maybe something warm to eat first. Would you be willing to meet me back here tomorrow? Henry considered briefly, then nodded slowly, a cautious smile forming on his lips. I'd like that. Thank you. Emily rose gracefully, brushing leaves from her coat. Thank you, Henry, she said sincerely. You've given me hope too. As Emily walked away, Henry felt an unfamiliar warmth, a sense of dignity and recognition he'd almost forgotten. He glanced toward Prescott's bakery, briefly catching sight of William's silhouette behind the window. Their eyes met for an instant, and Henry wondered briefly if perhaps this was the beginning of something greater, a change he had long stopped believing possible. William quickly stepped away from the window, heart pounding uncomfortably, deeply disturbed yet strangely hopeful by the powerful lesson his daughter seemed determined to teach him. The leaves continued to drift lazily along the cobblestone streets of Willow Creek, carried by the crisp autumn breeze. Henry sat alone in the quiet park, his eyes following the scattered dance of rust-colored leaves, while Rusty played idly near his feet, occasionally pawing at fallen branches. The small dog had already begun to show signs of improvement under Henry's watchful care, his fur less matted, his eyes brighter. Yet despite the puppy's increasing vitality, a lingering uncertainty clouded Henry's expression. He turned the worn flyer over in his calloused hands once more, studying it skeptically. Printed neatly in bold letters, it invited Willow Creek's residents to a prestigious charity event at Prescott Manor, the grand estate owned by none other than William Prescott himself. Emily Prescott had handed it to him personally, along with her sincere invitation. Henry recalled her words vividly. I believe you deserve a chance, Henry. My father needs to see that too. Please, give yourself this opportunity. Henry had wanted to refuse immediately, haunted by countless memories of disdainful glances and whispered insults from previous attempts at reintegration. But something in Emily's earnest gaze had compelled him to pause, and now here he was, deeply conflicted. Henry desperately wanted to prove himself, to break free from the chains of isolation, poverty, and stigma that had bound him for so long. Yet the risk of humiliation felt almost unbearable. Rusty's playful yelp interrupted his thoughts, pulling him back to the present. Henry reached out instinctively, gently scratching the dog behind his floppy ears. What do you think, boy? Henry whispered softly, smiling faintly. Rusty cocked his head curiously, tail wagging as if in encouragement. Maybe you're right, Henry murmured with cautious optimism. Maybe it's time we both got a second chance. Across town, inside the richly furnished study of Prescott Manor, William Prescott was pacing furiously. Emily stood calmly near the large bay window, her arms folded, watching her father's agitated movements. "Absolutely not," William growled, turning sharply to face her. His face flushed red, frustration evident in the tightness of his jaw. "Bringing that man here will embarrass our family. He can't possibly manage in this environment, Emily. He won't belong." Emily met her father's icy stare evenly, unwavering and resolute. "He deserves the opportunity, Dad. You spent your life telling me how you've built everything from scratch, how people should earn their way. Well, here's someone trying to do exactly that, and you're refusing to even let him try." William clenched his fists tightly, his polished appearance momentarily faltering under her scrutiny. Despite his resistance, Emily's words resonated deeply, dredging up uncomfortable truths he'd long ignored. "This event," he said, more quietly but still firmly, "is crucial to our reputation. There are important people attending, people who judge quickly and harshly." Emily's expression softened slightly, understanding her father's concern but refusing to yield. "And perhaps it's those very people who need to see someone like Henry given a chance. It could set a positive example. Wouldn't you rather be known for compassion than pride?" William sighed heavily, knowing his daughter's stubbornness well. Reluctantly, he nodded, resigned yet irritated. "Fine," he conceded bitterly. "Invite him. But mark my words, this is on you. And when he fails, maybe you'll finally understand how the world really works." Emily's eyes flashed briefly with hurt, but she remained silent, determined now more than ever to prove him wrong. Later that afternoon, Emily visited Henry again in the park, accompanied this time by a new figure, her friend Maggie Donovan. Maggie was a short, bubbly young woman with curly auburn hair and cheerful freckles sprinkled generously across a round, smiling face. Her lively demeanor was infectious, immediately setting others at ease. Emily introduced her quickly, explaining that Maggie had volunteered to help coordinate the upcoming event. Maggie shook Henry's hand firmly, offering a genuine smile, without hesitation or judgment. "We're thrilled you're joining us, Henry," Maggie said enthusiastically, her bright green eyes sparkling. Henry hesitated briefly, overwhelmed by the warmth of her greeting, before returning the handshake tentatively. He relaxed slightly, relieved to sense no hidden disdain in her kindness. Over the next hour, Maggie patiently described his duties for the event, assisting with decorations, greeting guests, and serving food. She reassured Henry multiple times, insisting that his presence would be invaluable, easing some of his lingering anxiety. Maggie's unwavering positivity and Emily's gentle encouragement gradually began to chip away at Henry's deep-seated fears. He felt, perhaps for the first time, genuinely hopeful. That evening, Henry carefully washed himself in a public facility, scrubbing diligently until years of neglect and hardship seemed temporarily washed away. He donned clothes Emily had discreetly provided, simple but neat attire, a modest white shirt and dark trousers. Looking at himself in a cracked mirror, Henry felt a strange pang of pride mixed with apprehension. "This is your chance," he told his reflection softly, hoping desperately that the man staring back at him wouldn't falter. When he arrived at Prescott Manor the following evening, Henry paused outside the grand entrance, awestruck by its opulence. The manor stood majestic against the twilight sky, lit warmly by lanterns lining the walkway. Nervously adjusting his shirt collar, Henry stepped cautiously inside, immediately greeted by Emily, dressed elegantly yet simply, her reassuring smile instantly comforting. "You look great, Henry," she encouraged warmly, gently touching his arm. Henry swallowed nervously, nodding gratefully. Maggie appeared soon after, bustling cheerfully around the great hall, effortlessly orchestrating preparations. Henry followed her lead closely, relieved to lose himself temporarily in practical tasks. Despite initial hesitations, Henry quickly proved himself attentive, diligent, and thoughtful, earning appreciative smiles from other volunteers who gradually shed their initial skepticism. As guests began arriving, however, Henry's anxiety intensified. His heart pounded uneasily, his mouth dry as he greeted distinguished figures whose curious glances seemed to pierce right through him. From a distance, William Prescott watched silently, his skeptical eyes narrowing slightly with irritation, yet also grudgingly acknowledging Henry's quiet competence. While serving refreshments, Henry overheard snippets of hushed conversations, some curious, others disdainful, reminding him vividly of his previous humiliations. His confidence wavered dangerously. Yet Emily, sensing his distress, appeared quietly at his side, murmuring gentle encouragement. "You're doing wonderfully, Henry," she whispered, squeezing his arm reassuringly. Henry took a deep breath, steadying himself with her support, determined not to falter. Later, while clearing empty dishes, Henry unexpectedly encountered a dignified elderly woman named Eleanor Hartley. With silver hair elegantly styled and warm, intelligent brown eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses, Eleanor exuded sophistication yet genuine kindness. Unaware of Henry's background, she thanked him graciously for his attentive service, engaging him briefly in thoughtful conversation. Henry felt unexpectedly respected and seen, encouraged profoundly by her genuine warmth. Observing discreetly, William felt something stir inside, unease mixed with reluctant admiration. He frowned, troubled by the growing realization that perhaps he'd misjudged Henry entirely. As the evening concluded successfully, Henry departed Prescott Manor with mixed emotions, exhausted yet exhilarated by his small victory. Rusty greeted him enthusiastically back at their modest shelter, seeming somehow proud of Henry's accomplishment. Despite lingering fears, Henry felt cautiously optimistic, realizing he'd managed to begin reclaiming his dignity. Simultaneously, William retired that night unsettled, his previous certainties shaken, while Emily remained quietly hopeful, believing firmly that this fragile opportunity was merely the beginning of transformative change. As the charity event reached its bustling peak, the lavish halls of Prescott Manor overflowed with well-dressed guests chatting animatedly beneath glimmering chandeliers. Classical music drifted softly from a nearby quartet, blending seamlessly with the gentle hum of laughter and clinking glasses. Amidst the elegance, Henry moved unobtrusively, his cautious movements marked by growing confidence, his eyes attentive to every detail. His heart was lighter than it had been in years, buoyed by a fragile sense of belonging and the hopeful encouragement from Emily and Maggie. However, just as Henry allowed himself a cautious moment of optimism, an unsettling disturbance rippled through the crowd. Henry looked up sharply to see Edward Morton, William Prescott's trusted head waiter, marching toward him with visible agitation. Edward was a lean, wiry man in his early 50s, his thinning brown hair slicked back meticulously. With thin lips perpetually pressed into a disapproving frown and suspiciously narrowed eyes, Edward projected an air of superiority and cold authority, making him feared rather than liked by most of the staff. "Stop right there," Edward snapped harshly, grabbing Henry's arm firmly enough to startle the quiet room into silence. Guests turned toward them curiously, conversations halting abruptly. What's wrong?" Henry asked, his throat tight with sudden apprehension, his heartbeat accelerating anxiously. Edward's voice carried clearly through the hushed room, deliberately loud enough to be overheard. "There's a valuable gold pocket watch missing, a family heirloom belonging to Mr. Prescott himself. You were the last seen near the cabinet. Empty your pockets immediately." Henry's stomach twisted painfully, embarrassment and disbelief washing over him in waves. His hands shook visibly as he emptied his pockets, revealing only a few crumpled bills Emily had insisted he take as advance payment and Rusty's small chew toy. Murmurs rose from the gathered guests, some skeptical, others sympathetic, but most judgmental. Henry felt acutely humiliated beneath their scrutinizing gazes. Emily, hearing the commotion, swiftly pushed through the crowd to Henry's side. Her cheeks flushed angrily, eyes flashing with fierce determination. "Edward, that's enough," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the tension. Edward sneered subtly, glancing dismissively toward her. "Miss Emily, I'm afraid the circumstances are quite clear. This man was innocent," Emily interrupted sharply, a hard edge in her normally gentle voice. "You have no right to accuse anyone without evidence." Edward hesitated briefly, momentarily losing some of his arrogance, but quickly regained his composure, holding Emily's defiant gaze stubbornly. From a distance, William Prescott watched silently, deeply unsettled by the unfolding drama but hesitant to interfere openly. Though wary of Henry, something about Edward's bold accusation left him uneasy. Emily, sensing Henry's growing despair, placed a reassuring hand gently upon his trembling shoulder. Her touch provided strength he desperately needed. "Come with me," she whispered calmly, guiding Henry away from Edward's piercing glare toward the quiet privacy of the service hallway. Henry, head bowed deeply in shame, spoke weakly, voice trembling with painful resignation. "This was a mistake. I should never have come here, Emily. I'm so sorry." Emily squeezed his shoulder gently, determined compassion illuminating her features. "You have nothing to apologize for, Henry. We will find the truth." Before she could say more, a quiet whimpering caught their attention from down the dimly lit hallway, behind the closed door of the pantry storage room. Henry's heart seized instantly, panic overtaking humiliation. "Rusty," he murmured anxiously, quickly following the faint sounds. Emily opened the pantry door cautiously, revealing Rusty confined inside a small cage, clearly frightened but otherwise unharmed. The puppy's expressive eyes brightened immediately upon seeing Henry, tail wagging weakly with relief. Henry knelt hurriedly, carefully freeing the grateful puppy from his imprisonment. Anger flared fiercely inside Emily, suspicion deepening instantly. "Someone put Rusty in here deliberately," she muttered darkly, "and I think I know why." At that moment, the sound of soft footsteps echoed quietly nearby. Emily motioned urgently for Henry to remain silent as they stepped deeper into the shadows. From their hidden vantage point, they watched Edward Morton quietly enter the adjacent storeroom, unaware of their presence. Carefully looking around to ensure solitude, Edward reached into his pocket, pulling out a glinting gold watch. He quickly concealed it behind stacked crates in the storage room, checking his surroundings once more before hurrying away with a smug, satisfied smile. Emily glanced at Henry, her eyes filled with vindication mingled with fury. "He framed you," she whispered fiercely. "This proves it beyond any doubt." Henry released a shuddering breath, relief washing over him heavily, tears briefly blurring his vision. Emily squeezed his hand reassuringly. "We need my father," she declared decisively, leading Henry back into the bustling main hall, Rusty trotting protectively at their heels. Spotting William near the staircase, Emily approached swiftly, meeting her father's puzzled gaze squarely. "We have proof Edward stole your watch and tried to frame Henry," she explained clearly yet quietly. William's expression shifted rapidly from confusion to disbelief, then finally to quiet, controlled anger. He nodded curtly, signaling discreetly for his private security chief, Ben Lewis, to join them. Ben was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered with a calm, authoritative presence. His dark, intelligent eyes assessed situations swiftly yet fairly, trusted implicitly by William to handle sensitive matters discreetly. Emily quickly detailed their findings to Ben, who immediately escorted them to retrieve the hidden watch. Moments later, Ben returned triumphantly, the watch securely in his hands. William stared silently at the heirloom, processing the uncomfortable realization of Edward's betrayal. With the watch restored, William turned solemnly toward Henry, meeting his gaze directly for the first time without skepticism or disdain. "Henry," he began quietly, his voice carrying sincerity rarely expressed openly, "I owe you a sincere apology. I misjudged you harshly, and that was wrong." Henry nodded cautiously, still shaken but profoundly grateful for William's rare admission of fault. "Thank you," he whispered softly, relieved beyond measure. Edward was quickly escorted from Prescott Manor, his protests ignored, his treachery clear. Guests murmured appreciatively, impressed by Henry's grace under adversity and moved by Emily's unwavering defense of justice and kindness. Rusty nestled protectively beside Henry, sensing his companion's profound relief. As the event slowly resumed normalcy, Emily gently guided Henry to a quiet corner, sitting beside him comfortingly. "You're incredibly brave, Henry," she said sincerely. Henry smiled faintly, shaking his head modestly. "I'm just grateful you believed in me," he replied softly. From across the room, William observed the pair thoughtfully, a newfound respect dawning within him. His rigid beliefs, previously unquestioned, had begun cracking subtly, revealing glimpses of humility and genuine empathy long suppressed beneath hardened layers of pride and prejudice. Quietly acknowledging his daughter's wisdom, William recognized that perhaps his greatest lesson tonight wasn't in charity given, but humanity rediscovered. Though deeply shaken by Edward's betrayal, William felt inexplicably hopeful, sensing a profound shift taking root not just within himself, but across Willow Creek. The night had revealed painful truths, yet illuminated greater possibilities. For the first time in memory, William Prescott allowed himself cautious optimism, inspired profoundly by Henry's quiet dignity and Emily's courageous compassion. Henry, though exhausted emotionally, finally experienced a fragile sense of genuine acceptance, fully aware that tonight marked a pivotal turning point toward healing. For himself, Rusty, and perhaps the entire community. In the early days following the tumultuous charity event at Prescott Manor, Willow Creek simmered with whispers. Word had spread swiftly through the tight-knit community, detailing the theft, the accusation, and the shocking revelation of Edward Morton's betrayal. The once tranquil town became a hive of gossip and speculation, eyes now sharply fixed on William Prescott. William felt deeply unsettled by the scrutiny, increasingly aware that his reputation, the reputation he'd spent a lifetime meticulously cultivating, hung precariously by a thread. Alone in his ornate study, William paced restlessly, glancing periodically at the somber portrait of his father, the founder of Prescott's Bakery. The elder Prescott's eyes, stern yet dignified, seemed to judge him silently from behind a gold-rimmed frame, adding pressure to his already burdened conscience. Edward Morton had been more than an employee. He'd been William's right-hand man for nearly 20 years. His loyalty had been unquestioned, his judgment respected implicitly. To discover such profound betrayal felt intensely personal, piercing through layers of self-assurance William had long cherished. But even more troubling was the memory of Henry's face, embarrassed, wounded, yet dignified. William had misjudged Henry profoundly, allowing his prejudice to blind him completely. A sharp knock startled William from his troubled thoughts. The study door creaked open, revealing Evelyn Carter, William's loyal assistant. Evelyn was a petite woman in her late 50s, with neatly styled silver-gray hair, intelligent brown eyes, and an eternally patient expression. Her gentle manner masked a keen wit and deep insight, qualities William had always relied upon, particularly in times of crisis. "Mr. Prescott," Evelyn began gently, sensing his agitation. "The town council has called a community meeting tomorrow evening. They wish for you to address the recent events publicly." William exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration. "They expect an apology, I assume?" Evelyn nodded calmly. "Yes, sir." An acknowledgement of the mistake would help ease tensions considerably. William sighed heavily, his expression strained. "It's not just my mistake, Evelyn. It's our bakery's entire image at stake. Admitting error publicly, especially towards someone I've openly disdained, could damage Prescott's Bakery permanently." Evelyn regarded William thoughtfully, her eyes compassionate yet firm. "Respectfully, sir, people value integrity more than perfection. An honest acknowledgement might actually strengthen our community's trust rather than erode it." William remained silent, torn deeply between pride and newfound humility. He dismissed Evelyn with a nod, promising he'd consider her advice carefully. Later that day, Emily visited Henry at his makeshift home near the park, bringing warm food and fresh supplies. Rusty barked happily upon seeing her, bounding energetically to greet his frequent visitor. Emily laughed lightly, scratching the puppy affectionately behind his ears. Settling comfortably onto a worn wooden bench beside Henry, Emily studied him carefully. Though clearly shaken by recent events, Henry appeared stronger somehow, his quiet dignity undiminished. "How are you holding up?" Emily asked gently, concern evident in her voice. Henry smiled faintly, shrugging lightly. "Better than expected. Honestly, your father's apology meant more to me than I thought possible. I never imagined someone like him could change his mind." Emily smiled softly, warmth filling her heart. "People can surprise you sometimes." She paused thoughtfully, choosing her next words carefully. "Dad faces a difficult decision tomorrow at the community meeting. He must choose whether to admit publicly how wrong he was. I believe he's struggling greatly." Henry nodded solemnly, eyes thoughtful. "It's not easy for someone like him to risk everything. I understand why he'd hesitate." Emily studied him carefully, noting the compassion in Henry's voice despite all he'd endured. Meanwhile, back at Prescott Manor, William wrestled internally with his choice. His pride screamed warnings against public vulnerability, yet Evelyn's wisdom haunted him deeply. The memory of Henry's quiet dignity stirred an unexpected ache within his chest, a painful acknowledgement of his failures. His restless pacing eventually led him to Emily's childhood bedroom, preserved exactly as she'd left it years before. Pictures adorned the walls, capturing moments of innocent joy and warmth he'd nearly forgotten. A framed photo caught William's eye, a younger version of himself holding Emily as a toddler, both smiling genuinely. William picked up the frame gently, fingers trembling slightly. He felt an overwhelming pang of regret for relationships damaged by his pride, recognizing clearly how distant he'd grown from Emily because of it. The following evening, Willow Creek's town hall buzzed with curiosity and tension. Townspeople filled every seat, eager to hear William Prescott address the recent controversy personally. William stood quietly near the stage entrance, anxiety tightening his chest painfully. Emily approached silently, gently touching his arm. "You're making the right decision, Dad," she said softly, her voice steady and reassuring. William looked deeply into his daughter's eyes, finding strength in her unwavering belief. Nodding once firmly, he stepped purposefully onto the stage, silence descending immediately upon the waiting audience. William cleared his throat carefully, gripping the podium firmly for support. His voice shook slightly, betraying nerves he'd never openly shown before. "Ladies and gentlemen, residents of Willow Creek," he began slowly, meeting their watchful eyes directly. "I've come here tonight not simply as the owner of Prescott's Bakery, but as a neighbor, father, and deeply flawed individual." Murmurs rose gently among the gathered crowd, surprised yet intrigued. William continued earnestly, his voice steadying gradually. "Recently, our community witnessed events at my family's charity event, including false accusations directed toward Henry Cooper, a man who has endured unfair judgment from myself and others. Those accusations came from someone I once trusted implicitly, Edward Morton. Discovering Edward's betrayal deeply wounded me, but more importantly, it revealed my own blindness and prejudice toward people like Henry." William paused briefly, swallowing hard, visibly moved. His sincerity captivated the room, commanding respectful attention. "Tonight, I stand before you openly acknowledging my mistake, publicly apologizing to Henry Cooper, and asking forgiveness from all of you whom I've disappointed." Henry, seated quietly near the back alongside Emily, stared wide-eyed, profoundly moved by William's genuine humility. Tears blurred his vision briefly, deeply touched by the man's courage. Emily gently took his hand, squeezing reassuringly. The audience responded warmly, applause rising spontaneously, sincere, and forgiving. William exhaled shakily, feeling a profound relief he'd never anticipated. As the applause gradually faded, William met Henry's eyes directly, silently expressing gratitude and respect. After the meeting concluded, townspeople approached William warmly, expressing appreciation for his honesty and integrity. Evelyn smiled approvingly from afar, proud of her employer's courage. Henry approached William quietly, extending his hand respectfully. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott," he said simply, voice filled with gratitude and sincerity. William clasped Henry's hand firmly, smiling genuinely for perhaps the first time. "Thank you, Henry," William replied earnestly, "for teaching me something invaluable." Rusty barked happily nearby, sensing the joyful reconciliation unfolding between the two men. Emily watched proudly, heart filled with hope. The night had transformed far more than reputations. It had restored dignity, rebuilt bridges, and unified a community through vulnerability and forgiveness. William Prescott, humbled profoundly, finally understood true strength. Not imperfection, but courageously confronting imperfection. Walking away later beneath starlit skies, Henry felt renewed purpose, his dream of acceptance now achievable. Willow Creek had changed irrevocably, no longer merely picturesque, but deeply compassionate, united by shared humanity rediscovered through painful yet liberating honesty. In the gentle glow of dawn, Willow Creek woke gradually, bathed in soft hues of gold and rose. Autumn's grip had loosened, replaced by a crisp yet comfortable chill that promised renewal. At the heart of town, where Maple Street met the bustling main road, a small building, freshly painted a welcoming pale yellow, now drew curious glances from passers-by. Above the doorway hung a modest wooden sign that read, "Henry's Hope Sandwiches," newly polished and ready to greet its first visitors. Henry stood quietly at the entrance, gazing upwards at the humble sign, pride and disbelief mingling warmly in his chest. Weeks had passed since William Prescott's heartfelt apology at the town meeting, yet Henry still found himself astonished by how swiftly life could shift directions. Rusty barked playfully from inside, eagerly trotting between freshly placed tables and chairs, tail wagging incessantly as though fully understanding the significance of the moment. The puppy had grown noticeably stronger under Henry's devoted care, his golden coat now glossy, eyes bright and curious. Rusty's transformation mirrored Henry's own journey, their bond symbolizing second chances and mutual healing. Approaching footsteps interrupted Henry's reflections, and he turned to see William Prescott himself walking slowly towards him. William carried himself differently now, his typically rigid posture softened, silver hair less strictly groomed, suggesting a newfound ease in his demeanor. His gaze was warmer too, freed from previous judgment, replaced with sincere respect. "Good morning, Henry," William greeted warmly, extending his hand in a genuine gesture of friendship. "Big day today." Henry smiled gently, shaking William's hand firmly. "It feels unreal," Henry admitted softly. William chuckled quietly, eyes crinkling at the corners. "I must admit, it's surreal for me as well. But this feels right, Henry. You've taught me more about dignity and humanity in these past few weeks than I've learned in a lifetime." Before Henry could respond, Emily approached cheerfully, her presence immediately brightening the atmosphere. Emily's enthusiasm had grown steadily since the town meeting, energized by her father's newfound humility and Willow Creek's evolving perspective. Today she wore a simple, cheerful floral dress, her hair tied back loosely, face radiant with pride. "Everything ready?" she asked eagerly, eyes shining brightly. "I believe so," Henry replied gratefully, glancing around the cozy shop. Emily placed a reassuring hand gently on Henry's arm. "Everyone's going to love it." Soon, familiar faces began arriving, eagerly filling the little sandwich shop. Among the first customers were Maggie Donovan and Evelyn Carter, each beaming warmly as they offered heartfelt congratulations. Maggie embraced Henry exuberantly, her curly auburn hair bouncing lightly, joy radiating from her expressive face. "You did it, Henry!" Maggie cheered enthusiastically. Evelyn, calm and composed as ever, simply offered an approving nod, quietly proud of Henry's achievement and William's growth. As guests chatted animatedly, savoring freshly prepared sandwiches and comforting cups of coffee, Henry found himself deeply moved by the tangible support from Willow Creek's residents. Previously indifferent neighbors now approached him warmly, expressing sincere admiration for his courage and perseverance. Willow Creek itself seemed different, more compassionate, empathetic, genuinely unified through shared humanity rediscovered. Amidst the cheerful bustle, a new visitor entered quietly. Eleanor Hartley, the elderly woman from the charity event, approached Henry with grace and dignity, her silver hair impeccably styled, eyes warm and encouraging behind gold-rimmed glasses. Eleanor smiled warmly, gently touching Henry's shoulder. "Congratulations, Henry," she said kindly, her gentle voice filled with genuine pride. "This town needed someone like you to remind us all of what truly matters." Henry felt humbled profoundly, grateful for Eleanor's sincere recognition. Later that afternoon, as the opening celebration slowed slightly, Emily approached her father privately, noting his thoughtful expression. "Are you all right, Dad?" she asked gently. William nodded quietly, eyes distant yet peaceful. "Better than ever," he replied sincerely, surprising even himself with the admission. "I never expected this little sandwich shop could mean so much, not only to Henry, but to me personally. Thank you, Emily, for believing in me enough to push when I resisted." Emily smiled warmly, deeply touched. Nearby, Henry quietly prepared sandwiches. Rusty curled happily at his feet, contentedly chewing a new toy. Observing their simple happiness, William felt profound gratitude toward Henry for his forgiveness, humility, and courage. In many ways, Henry had saved William, rescuing him from prideful isolation, reconnecting him deeply to the community he'd almost lost entirely. Over the coming days, Henry's Hope Sandwiches swiftly became Willow Creek's beloved gathering place. Local schoolteacher Sarah Fletcher, a slender woman in her early 40s, known affectionately for her cheerful disposition, unruly dark curls, and ever-present smile, visited frequently, praising the sandwiches enthusiastically to her students and colleagues. Sarah's infectious enthusiasm quickly spread throughout town, drawing residents eagerly to the welcoming shop. Likewise, young Deputy Sheriff Ben Holden, a tall, broad-shouldered man known for his quiet compassion and community involvement, often visited during his lunch break, warmly praising Henry's sandwiches and quietly encouraging townspeople to embrace the shop's symbolic message of forgiveness and second chances. Ben's steady presence reinforced community support significantly, deepening trust and friendship among locals. Soon, even skeptical townspeople initially hesitant to fully embrace Henry began visiting regularly, drawn irresistibly by genuine warmth, delicious sandwiches, and the sincere camaraderie found within the little shop. Conversations previously strained or non-existent blossomed naturally over freshly baked bread, melting lingering barriers between different social circles. Willow Creek had changed fundamentally, no longer divided, but deeply unified through mutual respect, compassion, and humility. Henry watched this transformation gratefully, heart filled with quiet pride. Rusty continued thriving beneath loving care, becoming Willow Creek's unofficial mascot, beloved warmly by regular visitors. Children especially adored Rusty's playful antics, bringing families joyfully into the shop each afternoon. Witnessing the puppy's vibrant recovery mirrored Henry's own journey toward healing and belonging. Weeks later, during a quiet afternoon lull, William Prescott approached Henry respectfully, holding a neatly wrapped package. Henry glanced up curiously, surprised by William's earnest expression. "I wanted to give you something," William explained gently, offering the package carefully. "It belonged to my father, something he treasured deeply. I believe he'd want you to have it now." Henry unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a beautifully crafted silver pocket watch, engraved delicately with the Prescott family crest. Henry stared wide-eyed, deeply honored by William's meaningful gesture. "Thank you," Henry whispered gratefully, moved beyond words. William smiled softly, placing a reassuring hand gently on Henry's shoulder. "Thank you, Henry," William replied sincerely, voice quiet yet profoundly emotional, "for teaching me the most important lesson of my life." As daylight faded gradually, casting golden hues gently across Willow Creek, Henry stood quietly at his shop's entrance, holding William's precious gift tightly, heart profoundly full. Rusty sat contentedly beside him, tail wagging gently, sensing Henry's quiet reflection. Together they watched peacefully as residents passed by cheerfully, each greeting offered genuinely, friendships renewed warmly, community bonds strengthened irrevocably. Willow Creek had rediscovered itself profoundly through Henry's humility and William's courage. The sandwich shop became far more than merely a popular gathering place. It symbolized forgiveness, compassion, and genuine second chances. Henry felt deeply grateful, understanding clearly how sandwiches and forgiveness had transformed not only his own life, but Willow Creek entirely. Standing beneath the modest wooden sign, Henry's Hope Sandwiches, Henry finally knew true belonging, rooted firmly within the warm embrace of a community transformed permanently by kindness, humility, and sincere forgiveness. Sometimes a single act of kindness can change a life, soften the hardest hearts, and inspire an entire community. Like Henry and William in Willow Creek, we all carry within us the power to forgive, to embrace compassion, and to give second chances. Let us remember never to judge someone based solely on their appearance or circumstance, for every person deserves dignity, respect, and love. In our daily lives, let's strive to open our hearts more, helping those around us, even if it's just a simple sandwich shared, a kind word spoken, or a hand reaching out in friendship. Because kindness is never wasted, and forgiveness can transform not only others, but ourselves as well. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs encouragement today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, saying amen if you believe in the power of kindness and forgiveness. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this. May God bless you abundantly and guide your path toward kindness, forgiveness, and peace. Comment amen below if you agree.